radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Thursday, September 12th. I hope everybody is having a fantastic week so far. I certainly am. Hope everybody else is as well. Last few days in Barcelona. I'll be heading to Israel on Sunday. I hope. A few more days of calm. And we'll be all set. So I expect to be flying to Israel on Sunday and be doing a show. I'm not sure exactly when, maybe Sunday, maybe Monday, from Haifa, and let you know my impressions of Israel. All right, let's jump into today's show, and don't forget, you can ask questions. Thank you, Cinda, for getting us started with the stickers. Don't forget, you can shape the show by asking questions in the super chat. I will answer all questions, including those that try to trip me up. Make comments. I will read them all as long as they're in the super chat. So that is the mechanism by which you can guarantee that your voice is heard on the Yaron Brook Show. Uticus says, I'm looking good. Thank you, Uticus. I'm glad. All right, so we talked about the debate yesterday. No point in rehashing the debate too much. But there is a lot of postmortem of the debates we heard today. A lot of people trying to defend Trump, trying to promote Kamala. I mean, there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of politicking going on. Donald Trump is quite clear about his performance in the debate. I mean, he basically says he won it. Here is his tweet. People are just starting to give me credit for having a great debate, in all caps, nonetheless. The voters and voter polls showed it, but the fake news media wasn't giving the credit that was due. Now, they are seeing the results with independent voters, evangelicals, and more, and saying, wow, I wasn't debating one person, I was debating three. They should fire everybody at ABC fake news, whose two lightweight anchors have brought disgrace onto the company. Where do you even start? But let's say basically all the polls are showing that he lost the debate. I don't know a single demographic where a poll show that he did not lose. It doesn't mean people have changed their minds. They haven't yet, and they haven't, and maybe they won't. I don't know that this is the debate that will lose him the election, but clearly he lost the debate. There's just no question about that, objectively, but also based on all the polls that we are seeing. Nobody is saying, wow. The mainstream media is not looking at the polls and saying, wow, Trump won. This is amazing. How did we miss this? That's just not happening. And then he was debating two lightweight anchors. If they were lightweight anchors, why didn't Trump, beat up on them? Why didn't he win the debate? If everybody around him is lightweight, why didn't he crush them? You'd think that he would be happy with lightweight anchors who he can then manipulate and crush and be superior to. But you see, Donald Trump has mastered something that the left has been good at for decades, really, a century, if you will. And that is, he's very good at this and executing on this idea that if you lie and repeat the lie over and over and over again, and you do it with confidence and self-assuredness and with no hesitation, and you keep doing it, then ultimately people will start believing it. Or some people will. But you're only trying to impact some people. And he's very good at it. And he constantly repeats this, constantly goes after it. And he will keep saying this, just like he keeps saying he won the 2020 election. He can't let it go. He won't let it go. He won the debate. Just so you know it, he did win the debate. And all the polls Show it. Every single poll shows that he won the debate, except the actual real polls that showed that he lost it. But we don't want to pay attention to those. So, Republicans are panicking a little bit. There's no question about that. GOP senators are running around trying to make excuses, although, and most of the excuses are, it wasn't fair, the moderators, we talked about this yesterday. I mean, he knew who the moderators were. He knew they would be on Kamala's side. He was handed softballs. He didn't answer the questions. He blew the debate. He could have won the debate, or at least he could have done okay in the debate, but he blew it. He did it. It was him. And a lot of the senators are admitting this. A lot of GOP senators, there's an article, interviews with a bunch of senators. One of them says anonymously, because he doesn't want his name quoted, she was well prepared and she didn't have to keep repeating the same thing. Yes, he repeats himself. Everybody says be more disciplined, but it's just not him. He can't be disciplined. They're also saying Trump got sidetracked into other things, that he didn't have to bring up the dogs and cats, the eating of the dogs and cats. We'll talk about that in a minute. They realize they're facing a real challenge. And I think they're worried not only that Trump might lose, but that he will have a bad impact on the down ticket on the Senate, which Republicans are hoping to gain this term. But the numbers don't look very good for them. So you would think this is a slam dunk for them this year. Doesn't look good for them. Republicans are running around trying to justify this, trying to find a scapegoat, trying to explain it, trying to rationalize it. Again, they're mostly blaming ABC and the moderators for the fiasco, but none of them believe that. They all know exactly what happened. Some of the blame is going towards Laura Loomer. You remember Laura Loomer, who supposedly was one of Trump's debate coaches and was on the plane with him when he flew at the debate, and then was again with him at the 9/11 memorial. So it seems like she's a close advisor, and she's a nutcase. She's a complete Looney Tunes. And I think a lot of people within the Republican Party are worried about that, but it's a little late. You guys nominated a crazy guy. You nominated a wacko. You nominated a moron. So you're going to get what you deserve, which is a bad debate performance, and having people like Laura Loomer be a coach, be an influence. I mean, she is a conspiracy theory nutcase. He took it to the 9/11 memorial, which was disgusting, because she's a 9/11 truther. She believes it was an inside job. So I think Republicans are panicking, but, what did they expect? They had choices. Can you imagine Nikki Haley debating Kamala 2 days ago? She would have wiped the floor with her. She would have stayed on message. She would have been disciplined. She'd have blamed Kamala for the inflation, for the bad economy. We could argue about whether it's true or not, but for the bad economy. She would have blamed Kamala for the retreat from Afghanistan. She would have blamed Kamala for the war in Ukraine. She would have blamed Kamala for not supporting Israel strongly enough. I mean, she would have destroyed her. And she would have blamed Kamala for the so-called border crisis. She would have stayed on message. She would have hammered away at Kamala on all the weaknesses, and she has many. Trump didn't do any of that. He didn't do any of that because he was too busy trying to, protect his crowd size and, explain his crowd size and act defensively about pretty much anything Kamala said. I mean, Nikki Haley would have wiped the floor with her. She'd be up now 5, 6, 7, 8 percentage points on Kamala. The Republicans had that choice. They had it. And they chose very clearly, unequivocally, with large majorities, they chose Donald Trump. And now they get to live with it. They get to live with that choice. I mean, he might still win. I'm not saying he's going to lose. He might still win. But even if he wins, they get to live with it. Either way, they're going to get to live with it. Anyway, Laura Loomer is quite a character. Yeah, I mean, just one other point before we get to Laura Loomer. Mike Lee, son of I used to admire Mike. No more, not for years now, since he became just a complete Trump acolyte. He used to be independent. He used to be a free market guy. He used to be a thinker. He used to be, no, I mean, he obviously never had a mind, because his mind, maybe this is the moment in him, his mind got completely captured by the Trump, I don't know, mindless syndrome, Trump mindless syndrome, which I named while Trump was president. The Trump mindless syndrome has just captured him. You know, basically it was, the moderator was Kamala's sorority sister, and that's shameless, and that's why Trump lost the debate. It's because Kamala's sorority sister was the debate moderator. How disgusting and awful is that? They went to the same sorority. Go figure. And then he says, and this is kind of scary, this is the right, this is Maga. This is Mike Lee, you'd think the better part of Maga. He says, the left's near complete domination of broadcast TV couldn't be more obvious. Perhaps it's time to re-examine the laws that make this possible. And people think that the Republican Party is going to defend our free speech? People think that a Trump administration is pro-free speech? This is Mike Lee, one of the more sane members of the MAGA community. He wants to change the laws to restrict the ability of the left to dominate broadcast TV? Really? I mean, it's not even true, their domination, particularly not as compared to olden times, given the existence of Fox and given the existence of the internet, given the existence of, I don't know, Newsmax and a million alternatives to the mainstream media. But yeah, this is something. All right. Let's see. Let's go back to Laura Loomer. Where is this tweet? I have to find this tweet. I guess I lost the tweet that I wanted to cite. I think it's there. Let me find it. One second. There it is. Here's a tweet that Laura Loomer tweeted on September 8th. Right. This is leading somewhere. So, this is what she tweeted: if Kamala Harris wins, the White House will smell like curry, and White House speeches will be facilitated via call center, and the American people will only be able to convey their feedback through a customer satisfaction survey at the end of the call that nobody will understand. Because Kamala is Indian, and therefore the White House will smell of curry, and Indians will be manning the phones through a call center, and da-da-da, you get the logic. That's Laura Loomer. That's the level of her communication. That's the level of who she is. Anyway, Marjorie Taylor Greene, probably the nuttiest person in Congress. That's because Laura Loomer lost her election to be in Congress. So Laura Loomer is not in Congress. So Marjorie Taylor Greene gets to be the craziest person in Congress. Marjorie Taylor Greene writes, "This is appalling and extremely racist. It does not represent who we are as Republicans or MAGA." I can't help but laughing. It actually does exactly represent who you are. This does not represent President Trump. This type of behavior should not be tolerated ever. Laura Loomer should take this down. And then there's a back and forth where they're each accusing each other of being more irrational and insane when, of course, they're both irrational and insane. They used to be friends. They had a falling out. I guess they had a falling out of I don't know, who could be closer to Trump? I don't know. Anyway, then, right, Laura Loomer responds. I'm sorry, I just find this funny and entertaining. And these are the people very, very close to the President of the United States. These are people influencing the United States. Laura Loomer was on the plane. She goes, this is what Laura Loomer writes. She says, it's rather ironic that MTG, Marjorie Taylor Greene, wants to call me a racist, when Marjorie Taylor Greene is a full-blown anti-Semite who believes the Jewish people use space lasers to control the world. True. Along with being an anti-Semite, Marjorie Taylor Greene is also a poor excuse for a Christian. Her marriage failed because she couldn't keep her legs closed while she was a new member of Congress and was too busy screwing some guy from her CrossFit. She's not representative of the GOP or what it means to be America first. Nobody talks about her anymore because she's annoying and irrelevant and a sellout. And then she writes to MTG, I exposed you months ago, and I'll do again, you trailer trash hoppy. This is the quality dialogue and exchange we get from the people very, very close to Donald Trump, to very well could be, again, the President of the United States. This is the quality of discussion that Twitter facilitates. I'm not saying it shouldn't, I'm just saying it does. And it's the quality of debate of people in influential places, a congresswoman, and a woman who flies around with Donald Trump around the country and supposedly coaches him on his debate skills. We saw how that worked. It's pretty sickening. Pretty sickening. Now, maybe this happens on the left as well. I wouldn't be surprised. But first to the left, and second, and so you don't expect much, but second, they don't quite make it as public. The kind of total, I don't know, what would you call it even? Total lack of any kind of civilizing anything. Anyway, that is the GOP. That is MAGA. That is who we're dealing with. That is one of the reasons I want them to lose, and I'd like them to lose in a landslide. This whole mentality needs to be erased, or it can't be erased. It needs to be marginalized. These people need to be marginalized. They need to be sent back to the zoo. They need to be sent back to some small sector of I don't know what it is that nobody cares about and nobody pays attention to. Which reminds me, I wasn't going to bring this up, but I did read this tweet. Let me just find it quickly. So our favorite conspiracy theorist, Candace Owen, is back with it again. Again, Candace Owen, a very strong member of the MAGA community. Candace Owen just dropped a bomb on millions of her viewers. She came up with she's discovered the truth about 9/11. A truth nobody else knows. A truth that, yeah. And that truth is that 2 hours before 9/11 happened, before those planes went into the towers, Israeli citizens were warned of the attack. They got an instant message on an instant messages service called Odigo, which was Israeli-owned and operated, headquartered, located 2 blocks away from the World Trade Center, and they were told, don't go into work. Don't go to Lower Manhattan. You're going to die. So 9/11 was one big Israeli conspiracy. She has a whole thing about who Odigo is and what happened to the CEO and all the messages and all this other stuff. And she has this on authority. She has evidence. She has proof. This is all. I mean, this woman is batshit crazy. First of all, this is a conspiracy that I heard a week after 9/11 already. Jews were warned not to go to the towers. And Israel really is responsible. There's no way Muslims could do this. Too sophisticated, they're too dumb. Only the Mossad could pull off something like this. Candace Owen, with her millions of followers, is now is now supporting a new Jewish, blood, what do you call it, blood thing. And that is, the Jews are responsible, Israelis are responsible for 9/11. That's the equivalent of not that long ago believing the Jews ate babies and kidnapped babies and ate babies. Talking about kidnapping and eating, I don't know, we're going all over the place today. This is not the order in which I expected to be talking. But I want to say something about the eating of pets. Trump made a big deal about the fact that Haitian migrants in Springfield, Ohio, are eating people's pets, cats, dogs, and so on. And of course, now that this is out of the bag, people are rushing to find evidence and find proof that people are eating ducks and geese from the park and eating cats. And I'm getting all kinds of emails. Oh, we once had this and this and they ate that. And, in this part of America, there was this and they ate that. And who knows? Maybe they're eating cats in Springfield, Ohio. Now, let me just say, Soup Cascade, they're eating the dogs, not the cats. Right? This is all arbitrary. I mean, maybe there is some crazy Haitian who's eaten somebody's dog, or cat, or duck, or geese. I don't know. But I know that Trump doesn't know. I'm sure there's stories of immigrants from all kinds of places around the world who don't know who animals are for eating, and they don't know the difference. Absolutely, there are cases like that. I remember, this is a long time ago. This is in the 1970s. I remember getting on the bus on the Sinai Peninsula. This is the time when the Sinai Peninsula was part of Israel. I mean, after the Six-Day War, it was part of Israel, before Israel gave it back to Egypt. And the bus stopped for a Bedouin, an Arab nomad tribe, who got on the bus. He'd never been on a bus before in his life. And he literally didn't know what to do with the chair. He didn't know how to maneuver his body to sit in the chair. He climbed all over it. It took him a while to figure it out. There have been lots of stories about Bedouin that were taken out of their tents and given homes and encouraged to live in the home, and they didn't know what to do with the toilet. They landed up using it for all kinds of other things other than what you use a toilet for. Yes, I mean, people that come from primitive cultures don't always know, and food is food, and they can't differentiate between animals. All that is quite possible. And we know that in, I think, cultures like China, they eat dogs. In France and in Mongolia, they eat horses. I ate horse meat in Mongolia, and it's like standard stuff. That's what they eat. So I'm not saying it never happens. Of course it happens. I'm saying, okay, if it happens, whoever did it should be prosecuted. Whatever the laws are against stealing somebody's cat, they should be prosecuted and blamed and punished for what they do. Okay? If they're taking ducks from the park and eating them, I'm not sure who owns those ducks. Okay, they need to be reprimanded. They need to be stopped. Something needs to be done about it. But the real question is, so what? The real question is this a reason not to have immigration? What nobody's talking about is the video I saw, and there's several videos like this, and I've researched this a little bit and actually did a show about this months ago, about the fact that Springfield, Ohio, actually encouraged the Haitians to come there because they were children laborers, and that they're very happy with the Haitians for the most part because they're good workers, and that the only problems they're having with the Haitians is the latest batch that have come there who don't have work permits and therefore are struggling to survive because they don't have work permits. Now, whose fault is that? Is that the fault of the Haitians, of immigrants, or is that the fault of our crazy, faulty, insane immigration system? So, yeah, I want only legal immigrants. It's easy. Make all the so-called illegal ones legal. Make it really, really easy to immigrate to the United States, and you'll only have legal immigrants. The only reason you have illegal, so-called illegal immigrants is because you've made it impossible to come to this country. And a lot of people, a lot of ambitious people, a lot of good people, a lot of people who want to come and work in this country can't get in. So you've left them no option but to come in illegally. They're not going to go back to the hellhole countries they came from. And I don't blame them for not wanting to go back. So yeah, I want all immigrants to be legal. Yes, and indeed that is the solution, to legalize immigration. So why bring up eating of cats other than to vilify in a horrible way all immigrants? Maybe one Haitian ate a cat, but Haitian immigrants now eat cats and they steal them. I mean, it's racist, it's xenophobic, it's disgusting. It's disgusting. It's Laura Luma. J.D. Vance is going around doing interviews. And partially he's trying to defend, because J.D. Vance is the one that really blew up this whole cat thing in Springfield, Ohio. And he's basically saying, look, it's not relevant whether they ate the cat or not. That's not the point. The point is, we've got all these immigrants and we don't want them. Well, he doesn't want them. And in one of the interviews, he says the following, and I'm quoting: if immigration was the path to prosperity, then America would be the most prosperous country in the world. Isn't America the most prosperous country in the world? He goes on to blame the immigrants for inflation and for all economic problems. Really? Immigrants responsible for inflation? I thought inflation was a monetary phenomenon. And maybe the responsibility for inflation was the stimulus package that Trump passed, and then that Biden doubled up on, and then the Inflation Reduction Act, and then the CHIP Act, and all the other stuff that Biden passed, all the government spending. Maybe that's responsible for inflation. But primarily, the two stimulus bills during COVID, that's responsible for inflation. Pretty much all economists agree on that. No, it's immigrants. Let's create a new, theory of economics. If anything, you could argue, immigrants have lowered inflation. They've come in, they've done jobs, they produced products that weren't being produced otherwise because the jobs, they didn't take anybody's jobs. Unemployment has been at historical lows as this huge influx of illegal immigrants have come in. And yet these illegal immigrants mostly have worked, and they have probably reduced inflation because they've increased the number of goods given the number of dollars in the economy. That's how it works. They probably reduced inflation. And indeed, most economists that I've seen, most studies that I've seen, have shown that this big boost in illegal immigration is probably one of the reasons, maybe not the only reason, but certainly one of the reasons that we're not in a recession right now. People come here, they work. That creates economic activity. That's a frigging good thing, not a bad thing. When did it become bad to come to this country to work? When did it become bad to have economic activity? When did it become bad to have a job? I mean, you'd think that J.D. Vance would know that the U.S. is indeed the most prosperous country in the world. And you'd think he'd know a little bit about economics, not a lot, a little bit about economics, and know that immigrants did not cause inflation. And indeed, if he's researched this even a little bit, he discovered that most good economists believe that immigrants have actually reduced inflation, increased GDP, and maybe helped us avoid a recession. But no, that doesn't fit the agenda. And the agenda is to scare the bejesus out of Americans, to scare them about immigration, because that's their path to victory. I mean, if there's one issue that Trump, I think, can win, it's the immigration. If he scares people enough, he can convince them that he can do something about it. But it's all just fear tactics. It's disgusting. It's absolutely, unequivocally disgusting. The dogs and cats and whatever, the whole discussion of it, the whole debate of it, again, help these people assimilate. They'll stop eating your cats if they're eating anybody's cats. They're not. There's no proof of it. There's no evidence. There's nobody. But even if there was, put the guy who ate the cat in jail and teach him a lesson. One of the ways you teach immigrants a lesson is you enforce the laws. Enforce them. I see some of you are having fun with this topic. Axton says, duck and cat restaurants opens up a whole new sector of the economy. Why are you putting ducks and cats in the same category? Don't you guys eat duck? Duck is like delicious, and there's duck in most restaurants. Certainly, most restaurants have duck. American restaurants have duck. I mean, some places you can even eat duck liver. It's called foie gras. Ducks are common. It's the cat that is the problem. Because in our culture, cats are pets, and therefore you don't eat them, which is completely reasonable. But in other cultures, they're not pets, and therefore people do eat them, which is completely reasonable too. Cats could taste good too. Maybe, but you just don't eat them. Right? All right. I like ducks. Anybody got a problem with liking ducks? Why would you not eat ducks? All right, where are we? Yes, one other point I want to make about Trump. Yes, Trump and Ukraine. J.D. Vance, he's doing these interviews, so he's doing a bunch of them. And in interviews, he's being asked, what is Trump's solution to Ukraine? Trump, of course, won't answer this question. He evades it. He talks about cutting a deal. He talks about making a deal. He talks about, Putin is afraid of him. We'll get to that in a second. Putin is intimidated by him, so he can get a deal done. He'll get a deal. Don't worry, there's going to be a deal. But what is the nature of that deal? The nice thing is that J.D. Vance, maybe he's not a good enough politician, to evade that. So he actually is saying what the deal will be in an interview. That is on X, where we all get most of our news, right? And it's the free speech platform, so you get the whole variety. This is what I get. This is the Trump-Vance plan for Ukraine. It's basically to force the Ukrainians to accept the fact that Russia will maintain control over the 20% of Ukraine that they have taken by force. It will, quote, demilitarize that 20%, but it will basically be under Russian control. That is not enough, of course. That doesn't give Putin everything he wants. It will also involve the Ukrainians committing to not joining NATO. It will involve the Ukrainians not committing to other allied institutions, which means the European Union. They can't join the European Union. It means taking sovereignty away from Ukraine. Ukraine is not a sovereign nation. If they can't choose who to have treaties with, if they can't choose who to economically ally with, who to militarily ally with, then they don't have sovereignty. It basically means selling, and in exchange, Putin will promise, what they call it, a little finger, and use the little figurative promise. He will promise, really, really, really promise, that he will never invade Ukraine again, that he will leave them alone, that he will just accept their territory, accept them, and just leave them alone. In other words, what Trump means by cutting a deal with Putin is giving Putin, well, not everything he wants. He wants all of Ukraine. 90% of what he wants. It basically means eviscerating Ukrainian sovereignty. Because once they can't join NATO and they can't join the EU, and they can't take their land back, and Russia's right there, Russia hasn't changed, then who do you think they're going to accommodate? Who do you think they're going to become part of the Russian bloc? They're going to become subservient to Putin. So in some sense, you could say that the Trump-Vance plan to cut a deal is to give Russia everything they want. I mean, voting for Trump is voting for Putin victory in Ukraine. And Putin might win in Ukraine anyway, but this is with an America seal of approval, commitment with guarantees with the United States. In other words, a massive show of weakness on behalf of the United States, basically groveling and giving the Russians everything they want. Which brought up, let me just see, where are we? Yeah, which brought up this other video. Oh, where did it go? It disappeared on me. I have to find this. This is a really cool, yeah, this is a video of Turnbull Malcolm, 29th Prime Minister of Australia. I don't know anything about him. I don't know if he's a good guy, bad guy. But this is how this is what he said about Trump. And you know, I don't know. Maybe he's making this up. Maybe he hates Trump. I don't know. But this is what he said about Trump. Sounds 100% accurate to me. And it consistent with what John Bolton says, and he knows. Consistent with what McMaster says, and he knows. Consistent with what other people within the defense establishment say about Trump, and they know. But this is what the 29th Prime Minister of Australia says. He says, quote, "When you see Trump with Putin, as I have on a few occasions, he's like the 12-year-old boy that goes to high school and meets the captain of the football team. My hero. It's really creepy." I shouldn't laugh because it's not funny. It's actually super duper scary. But anybody who thinks that, you know, Putin is intimidated by Trump is I think, deluding themselves. Putin is not intimidated by Trump. Putin knows he can manipulate Trump. Putin knows Trump is a weakling who will cower before Putin. And indeed, J.D. Vance just told us. As soon as Trump is elected, he will sit Putin down, sit Zelensky down, and force Zelensky to give Putin pretty much everything Putin wants. And that's the art of the deal. That's Donald Trump, the deal maker. I mean, I'm not sacrificing young people for Ukraine. Ukrainians, I don't want to put boots on the ground. I never said military personnel. But I will tell you this. If the United States had provided Ukraine with the weapons they wanted when they wanted them, if the United States had allowed the Ukrainians to use American weapons appropriately, then Ukraine could defeat the Russian army. That is, Ukraine could push the Russians out of Ukraine. And Ukraine today is occupying a portion of Russia, which at least they'll have something to negotiate with, because Trump won't help them. And if Ukraine wants to fight a war, why is it any of your business? Ukraine doesn't think that they can't defeat the Russians, but you do. You and a bunch of second-rate military experts who thought that Kiev would fall in 2 weeks. I mean, the only person I know who publicly stated on day 2 of the war with Ukraine that Ukraine had a shot at kicking the Russians out and actually defending Kiev and getting rid of the Russians, and the Russians were a lot weaker than what you thought they were, was me. And I was right. Russia is a pathetic army with pathetic soldiers and pathetic military equipment. And the only thing that prevents Ukrainians from winning this, prevented already, has been the fact that the United States has handcuffed them in terms of how the weapons are used and has not provided them with the weapons in time. You know, whether it's tanks, F-16s, everything else. But, yep, you guys can pretend that you know that the Russian military is this powerful, strong military. It's got nukes. I'll give them that. I don't think Ukraine could conquer Moscow because they drop nukes on it. But Putin would never use nukes just to defend territory in Ukraine. Anyway, if you followed me for more, for a few years now, you know that I've been pretty consistent in Ukraine and pretty right on most of what I've said about Ukraine. I've been pretty right on Ukraine. You'd think somebody would give me credit. I've been pretty good on wars generally. You'd think somebody would give me credit. If you go back to 9/11 and everything I said post 9/11, I'm even shocked at how right I was about what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. I'm shocked at how right I was in 2003 when I gave lectures in Israel, and how right I was about Gaza and the Palestinians. But what is really shocking is I get no credit for any of that. But I should. All right, talking about 9/11. Talk about 9/11. We commemorated it yesterday, and I talked about the complete failure of the Bush administration, the complete failure of the response to 9/11 of Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden. A complete and utter disgrace, a complete and utter betrayal of America. And we're seeing it today, right? We're seeing it continuously in the Middle East. The war that started in 9/11 didn't really start in 9/11. It started in the 4th of November, 1979, when the Iranians took the American embassy. The war was never with Al-Qaeda. It was never with the Taliban. It was never limited like that. And it was certainly never with Iraq. The war. Yeah, you should check out my show from the Ukraine war at the start. Check out the shows I did early on in Ukraine. Check them out. Give me a score on how right or wrong I was. The war should have never been with Iraq, should have never been with Al-Qaeda. The war was with Islamism. It was with all the organizations and the governments that represent the Islamist ideology, the ideology of Islamic totalitarianism, the ideology that believes in world conquest and the application of Islam to every aspect of our life on a global scale. And if you understand that that was the war, and I said so at the time, and I said so over and over and over again in the last 23 years, then the more you read about what's going on in the world, the more you realize how much we've lost and how much we keep losing, right? For example, today there's a story out in the Wall Street Journal about the fact that Al-Qaeda and Islamic State, ISIS, who I thought Trump had eviscerated. Anyway, Al-Qaeda and Islamic State are maybe more powerful today than they've ever been, particularly in North Africa. A large swath of part of Africa, just south of the Sahara Desert, Al-Qaeda and Islamic State basically dominate the region. The United States has placed troops in there, anyway from Kenya, and they had a big regional stronghold in Niger. The U.S. soldiers and military have been kicked out of Niger. They had abandoned, I can't remember, $100 million drone base, Air Force base in Niger, and they've been kicked out of there. As the United States has exited, ISIS and Al-Qaeda become stronger in the region. Now, you could say this is the problem of the region and we shouldn't get involved, and there's some legitimacy to that, but we know that once ISIS and Al-Qaeda dominate territory, establish themselves territorially, they immediately start training and planning and launching terrorist attacks against the West, America and Europe. And there's no question that that's what they're going to do with the territory they have in Africa and that it is growing in Africa. So American forces being kicked out of Niger. They're scrambling. Now, the way they're fighting Al-Qaeda and ISIS is pathetic and absurd, and the fact that these little tribes and gangs are gaining and that the American military is in retreat is pathetic. But America's still trying, right? In the wrong way. So they're they're refurbishing an air base in Benin that can accommodate helicopters, and they're stationing Green Berets in the Ivory Coast, and they're trying to negotiate to return to an air base in Chad. In the meantime, the Islamists are wreaking havoc in Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, all the way to Eastern Africa, all the way to the Atlantic Ocean on the other side. They're building a real base. They're building a real caliphate. Now, one of the advantages the U.S. has is that ISIS and Al-Qaeda hate each other, so they often land up fighting each other, which helps us. But, you know, Islamism, even as Al-Qaeda and ISIS are still alive and well and thriving. We lost the 9/11 war, or at least haven't won it yet, and far from it. It's 23 years later. It's a long war. This is what George W. Bush called an unwinnable war. Well, that's why we put out a book called The Winnable War. I encourage you to check it out, edited by Langiano. I have 3 essays in there describing how to win the war against Islamism and its organizations as states. And the first step you have to do in order to win this war is defeat Iran. And then you have to eviscerate all these organizations. And by the way, Hamas and Hezbollah are on that list, as well as ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And you can do it. It's all doable if you have the will and a proper strategy and a clear definition of the enemy. Highly encourage you to buy the book, Winning the Unwinnable War. Ilan Jono is the editor of that. In addition to ISIS and Al-Qaeda kind of dominating the strip of lands just south of the Sahara Desert, you've also had an election this week in Jordan. Jordan is a country at peace with Israel, supposedly. Jordan is a country that kind of has elections. They don't mean that much because it has a king, and the king rules, right? It's a kingdom, after all. Encourage you to read it. Encourage you to read the book, Winning the Unwinnable War. And they just had an election. Now, I don't believe the elections are very fair in Jordan. I think they're tilted. Remember, they have a king. Not a king like in England, a real king, a king with power. Well, it turns out that the largest political party that won the largest number of seats, not enough for a majority, but the largest number of seats in the Jordanian parliament is a political group called the Islamic Action Front, which is a spin-off of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is basically an Islamist organization. It supports Hamas. Now, if you had fair and free elections in Jordan, there's a good chance this group would actually win a majority. So Islamism is not dead. Islamism is thriving in the Middle East. It's growing. And 9/11, those 5,000 American kids that died in the fight, for what? Sad, horrific, depressing. And that's what we should be talking about. Instead, Candace Owen wants to blame the Jews. Yeah, when you don't understand something, when something out of your control, when you're losing, when it's blame the Jews. Always safe to blame the Jews. Somebody said we should have more sanctions on Iran. Really? Really? That's the solution? Sanctions? It's pathetic. Sanctions have never helped, never solved any problem anyway. Solution is destroy the Iranian regime. The solution is not kill this particular person, destroy the regime, crush it, eviscerate it. You can do that from the air, probably. Pathetic. It's not about sanctions. It's about destruction and replacement. That should have been done in 1979 when they took hostages. That's when it should have been done. Certainly should be done today. Supikaski says the king of Jordan is the only thing that keeps Jordan from becoming an Islamist terror outpost. Yeah, that's right. How sad is that? That you have to rely on a king. But that just shows that we lost the war after 9/11. Okay, a few other stories. This was a cool story. You might view it as a positive. I don't know if you view it as a positive, but it's a cool story. You remember the other day? Now, this is a bit of a speculative story, so I just want to make it clear. I do not have definitive knowledge, inside information, intelligence that this is true. It seems true to me. It comes from what I consider a fairly reliable source, quoting U.S. and Israeli officials. But I think it's fairly reliable, and it fits the pattern that I know of how these things work. A couple of days ago, I described to you an attack of the Israeli Air Force on a number of facilities in Syria. And I mentioned the fact that this is a massive attack. 5 waves of fighters, 5 waves of bombs dropped. Why do you need 5 waves in the same general area? It was talked that this is a site of the Scientific Studies and Research Center, which is near Maïsaf, where there's some talk about the development of chemical weapons and other sophisticated missile technology and a missile production site potentially. But even that seemed weird because you'd expect that a lot of that would be very deep. That if that existed, that would exist deep underground in pretty protected and protective facilities. Well, this is a story, at least coming out of U.S. and Israeli officials, and that is that the airstrike, while it served the purpose of destroying facilities and killing some people, was really just a cover. It was a cover for a raid of what's called in Israel Sayeret Matkal, which is the premier, the number 1 special forces team in Israel. It's something like Simtil 6, but maybe it's more like Army Rangers or something like that. It's not the divers, it's not the SEALs, it's the Army version. And Sayeret Matkal is a unit that I think most Israelis are familiar with. This is a unit that the stories were pretty crazy about what they had to do in order to train for this. For example, one of the assignments would be basically sneak into Syria, go to cafe in Damascus and bring back evidence that you were there. And we're not talking about like flying in using disguises. We're talking about crossing the border and finding your way there. So, I mean, these are tough guys. This is the kind of unit that I think could have done this. Anyway, the idea was that Sayeret Matkal flew by helicopter over 125 miles into Syrian territory. They landed at this Scientific Studies Research Center, around which there was a lot of bombing. This facility is deep into the ground. They managed to basically kill the Syrian guards, go deep down into where this facility is underground, plant explosives in deep underground facility, get out of there, and then remotely detonate and explode the whole thing and totally destroy this facility. Now, it was probably a facility that was providing missiles to Hezbollah. It's probably a facility funded and run by the Iranians. It could have very well also had chemical weapon development and other advanced, warfare. But this is this is Delta Force stuff there, Delta Force, not Green Beret, more like Delta Force. These are the best of the best. And it appears that this is potentially what happened. As I said at the time, it seemed strange that Israel was devoting so much air power to this one place. Well, if there's a diversion, they had to buy time. 5 waves now make sense, right? You want to keep them occupied while this is going on. While the unit goes in, plants the bombs, gets out of there safely, and then detonates. So, pretty cool, I think. Pretty positive news. Got the bad guys, and the good guys all got away. Related to that, on the big category of, I guess, special forces, is another story, this one's in Financial Times, a story about Team Still 6. This is, of course, elite U.S. unit, and generally, I think, I don't know if it's SEAL Team 6 specifically, but more the SEALs are training extensively in preparation for an invasion of China into Taiwan. They are working and training in a facility in Virginia Beach, where the SEALs are based, to basically deter what would happen if China invaded Taiwan? How could the SEALs enter Taiwan and help them defeat the Chinese, or at least slow the Chinese progress, or make it very difficult for them to do it? I don't know what that entails, whether that entails underwater stuff, they are SEALs after all, or whether that entails guerrilla warfare on the island, or what it exactly entails, but it does mean that the United States is definitely pivoting to training its troops for the possibility of real conflict with China down the road over Taiwan. All right, let's see. I got 2 more stories. 2 more stories? Yeah, 2 more stories. Okay. First one is we're going to stay with Israel. It was just published, I guess the Israelis published this. The Israelis have discovered a letter that was sent to Sinwar, the head of the Hamas, by the head of the Khan Yunis, which is one area in the south of Gaza, the Khan Yunis chief, where he's basically begging Sinwar for help as his troops and his brigade is collapsing. So in the letter, he basically indicates that the IDF has killed about 50% of Hamas fighters, approximately 17,000 terrorists, if you extrapolate this across the whole thing. So even if Hamas casualty figures what they say is 40,000, take out 17, that's 23,000 civilians, 17,000 terrorists. That's a 1.3 to 1 ratio of civilians to combatants, based on this letter, an extrapolation from it. 1.3 to 1. And Israel's been pretty upfront about the fact that they believe that they've killed about 17,000 terrorists. And I think this is based on this kind of intelligence that they're getting from Hamas, and as they take over their facilities and find computers and get their communications. Now, just to give you a sense, 1.3 to 1, civilian to combatant ratio. The United Nations states that the average ratio in war is civilian to combatant. What do you think the average ratio in war is civilian to combatants? And we're not talking about urban warfare, heavily dense city-like warfare. We're talking about just generally, in war. What's the percentage of civilians who die for every soldier who dies? For every combatant who dies? Anybody have any sense of what that would be? Well, just be chilling, says 30 to 1. No, but you're in the right direction. It's 9 to 1. So in an average war, 9 civilians die for every 1 combatant. In Gaza, 1.3 civilians die for every 1 combatant. Not exactly genocide. Quite the contrary. This is one of the most precise wars in all of human history in terms of only targeting combatants. Utica says 10-1. He was closest. 9-1 is the number. This is unbelievable precision. Now, I would say this is spooky and suggests massive Israeli sacrifice. And I think a lot of Israeli soldiers have died in order to keep the ratio 1.3-1. And indeed, Israel probably could have won this war 6 months ago at a 9-1 ratio. And it should have won the war 6 months ago, even if it meant going to a 9-1 ratio. So it's just unbelievable how Israel is being treated. By their standards, I'm not talking about my standards, their standards. This is one of the most humane wars ever fought. And in some of the worst conditions. We're talking about narrow streets, one of the most densely populated places on planet Earth. It's really unbelievable how few civilians have died in Gaza. I know how they did it. I think it's pathetic. They did it by sacrificing themselves, by not winning the war. By the way, one of the things that comes out of the letter is that not only have 50% of his troops been killed, another 25% have run away. That is, they don't want to fight. Why would they? So Hamas has been decimated from the perspective of its fighters. All right, finally, a story in China. And again, this kind of repeats itself. These stories just reconfirm the same thing that I've been talking about, but I think that's good. We keep discovering new evidence. China's economy is struggling. And one of the most striking things about the Chinese economy is the complete collapse of entrepreneurship. The complete collapse of venture-backed startups. I mean, in 2018, there were over 50,000 venture-backed startups in China. American venture capitalists couldn't put their money to use in China fast enough. And then COVID happened and it went down because you'd expect it to go down during COVID, particularly given the unbelievably harsh conditions under which the Chinese locked down their own population. But it appears that in 2023, and even more so in 2024, the number of venture-backed startups in China is under 1,000. It's gone from 50,000 to under 1,000 to several hundred. There's been a complete collapse in the entrepreneurial spirit, in the entrepreneurial activity in China. And what got China out of poverty? What got China to become, I won't say a rich country, but what appears to be a successful country economically? Entrepreneurs, tech companies, but lots of other entrepreneurial companies. But China was a leader in technologies. Tencent and Huawei and these others were really innovative. Really innovative. Excellent. Let me give you a trick. He says, Dr. Brook's shows are amazing, but there are so many of them and they're so long. We need Yaron Brook show cliff notes for busy people. Here's the way to get a cliff notes. Put the speed to 1.5, and then you hear me speak really, really fast, and you can cover a show really, really quickly that way. That's the secret. Anyway, you see a graph of the rise of entrepreneurship in China and just the total collapse. And why is it collapsed? Why is it collapsed? Well, here's just one story that kind of gives you the flavor of what's happened in China. China has about 8,700 investment bankers. Last year, I think it was last year, they were forced to take a big pay cut in the name of egalitarianism, in the name of common prosperity. No bonuses, big pay cuts. Now, they're being accused of fraud. Top investment banks are being arrested. They're being detained by the authorities. One of them, who got out of the country, worked for one of the big banks, was arrested overseas and handed over to the Chinese authorities. Investment banks, bankers, have been asked to hand over their passports to the authorities so nobody else leaves. If you remember what happened to Jack Ma when he criticized the central bank. Basically what China has done since 2019 is clamp down on entrepreneurs, taken the incentive away. They have regulated, controlled, imprisoned, attacked, made being an entrepreneur a dangerous profession. Guess what happens? You take away the incentives for entrepreneurship, entrepreneurship goes away. Here's just a quote from this article. China used to be the best VC destination in the world after the United States. The whole industry has just died before our eyes. The entrepreneurial spirit is dead. It is very sad to see. I agree completely. This is, again, an article in Financial Times. Pretty scary if you look at the science park in Suzhou, which is south of Shanghai. I was close to there. I was in Huangzhou, which is close to there. They built all these beautiful buildings, beautiful architecture, office parks for high-tech companies, and they're empty. It's completely lifeless. There's just nobody there because there's no startups, and the tech industry is shrinking. It's not growing the way it was. One of the reasons I'm not afraid of China. I'm not afraid of China. All right. So, yeah, China's in decline. One of the reasons not to be too worried about China as a threat to the United States in the future. On the other hand, the flip side of that, there is a flip side of that, is that as authoritarian regimes decline economically, as people domestically start struggling and maybe start blaming the regime for their economic struggles, authoritarian regimes often will then pivot to a nationalist, militant, military offensive style in order to distract the population from its economic worries. They'll usually create an enemy, they'll spend a lot of time building up that enemy, and then they'll attack. And that is to deflect, to distract the population from its economic worries. So, my attitude towards China is, I wish they embraced the economic policies that led them to be rich and successful. Because I think those economic policies would also lead them ultimately to be freer. And I think that those economic policies, once they made them rich, would discourage them from going to war. There's too much to lose. When you're poor, there's not a lot to lose in a war. When you're rich, there's a lot to lose in a war. So I want a rich China. Rich China is a better trading partner than a poor China. You get more in the value for value trade deal. All right, guys, that is the news for September 12th, 2024. Yep, I covered all of it. All right, let me move the super chat questions into, they're not many. So let me just remind you, we talked about value for value. Hopefully we're all traders. You get value from the show. Please consider supporting the show. Those of you here live, some of you are not here often, but sometimes you're here. Please use the opportunity that you're here to support the show through the super chat or through a sticker. Stickers can cost anything $2 to $500, whatever you guys want to do. But please support the show, and particularly if you like the long shows. The long shows have to be, my time has value all of our time has value. Show value for value in a trade. Those of you not listening live, or those of you listening live but would rather not use the super chat, you can monthly support the show with Patreon or PayPal. You can go to yaronbrookshow.com/membership and subscribe by PayPal. Please do so. And please do so now before you forget. I know we all procrastinate about these things. We like know, yeah, I should subscribe to Yaron Show. It's not right that I'm not subscribing to Yaron Show. But you never do it because you never get around to it. So do it now. Just open up Patreon, put in Yaron Brook Show, and subscribe. It's easy. It's not hard at all. And again, those of you who are live, one of the things you can really add to the show and make the show more interesting is ask good questions. I mean, I always get good questions, but ask more questions. And that way you get to shape the show and I get to talk about things that interest you. So ask questions. All right, as I said, not a lot of questions, so show might not be that long. But we can still take more questions, particularly looking for questions at the $20, $50 level would be fantastic. Skipped a bit. All right. Let's see. Michael, $50. Thank you, Michael. Michael says, in a rational and healthy economic system, we would already have lots of trillionaires. Instead, our schooling mostly stifles the entrepreneurial spirit of most kids, and a Byzantine business regulatory environment hobbles the rest. I don't know about the trillionaires. I don't know. I have no real value. We'd all be richer. Now, would an entrepreneurial free market actually create more competition for the billionaires and actually make it harder to become a billionaire? It's still, we'd all be richer, but would the very, very rich be richer? I'm not sure. My point is I don't know, and I don't really care in the sense that, whatever freedom produces, freedom produces in terms of wealth distribution. But it's not obvious to me that that if you increase competition, which you would, by eliminating regulations and by opening it all up and making it really free and eliminating the distortions of a central bank and an inflationary environment, it's not clear how wealth would be distributed, if you will. I don't know. Don't really care. But maybe there'd be a lot more trillionaires because we'd have so much more wealth in the world, maybe. And being a trillionaire wouldn't be that big of a deal. Maybe prices go down and you don't need to be a trillionaire. Actually, being a billionaire would make you, or even a millionaire would make you super wealthy. So it depends how it manifests itself. The point is, that if we had free markets, a quality of life and standard of living of anybody who's productive, at whatever level of productive capacity they have, anybody who's productive, their standard of living and quality of life would be dramatically higher than it is today. Dramatically so. That is what's important. Jennifer says, all joking aside, since animals do not have rights, it is fine to eat any type of animal. It is a personal choice. Yes, you just can't eat other people's pets. That's wrong. And you probably shouldn't take ducks from the local park, probably because the local government is investing in those ducks. But yes, but what animals you choose to eat, I mean, there's certain things that I find disgusting, but that some cultures they eat, but there's nothing wrong with that. There's no issue. Most of the stuff I find disgusting in terms of eating has not, is even lower on the food chain, like certain bugs that I wouldn't want to eat. So absolutely right, Jennifer. Agree completely. Super Chat says that it's not working. Okay, let's try reloading it. Give me a second here while we see why this maybe is not working. Let me say that I answered Jennifer's question, which I did. And we can restart this, which it did. And octopus is a no-no. Octopus is amazing. I love octopus. Octopus is one of the best. You get a lot of octopus in Puerto Rico, and you get a lot of octopus here in Spain. Generally in Spain, you get a lot of seafood. they love prawns, and they love to give you the head of the prawn with all the testicles, tentacles sticking out, and you get the head of the prawn, and then they tell you to suck on it, like to suck all the juice out of it and the brain and everything out of it. So it's tasty. It's tasty. It's prawns. All right, why is this not working? Reload. Let's see, why is this not working? All right, now it works. Okay. Noah, Yaron, are you in favor of Puerto Rico and DC becoming states? Safe travels. P.S. Debate Kyle Kulinski. Secular talk, please. Somebody arrange for the debate and have it sponsored. I'll debate Kyle. Absolutely. Am I in favor of Puerto Rico and DC becoming states? Well, it depends on what perspective you're thinking about it. I think Puerto Rico, if it's going to stay a part of the United States, should become a state. I don't think it's good for Puerto Rico to become a state. I think Puerto Rico would be better off if it stayed the way it is today and engaged in sound economic policies. I think it has the benefit of being under American system of law with the flexibility of being able to set its own path. So I think Puerto Rico is better off staying in the situation it's in today. But it really doesn't make any sense for the United States to keep it in that situation. It should make them a state. DC, I don't know. I think better than DC becoming a state. I would carve off most of the residential areas in DC to the adjoining states and just leave the core of DC as not part of any state. But DC is too small of a state to become a state of its own. Just give parts of it to Maryland, a lot of it to Maryland, maybe most of it to Maryland. I don't know. Why not? I don't see the point of creating another state in DC. It just seems silly. Let's see. Michael, are thoughts a form of energy, since according to Objectivism, they are not physical? Well, I'm trying to think. What would be an example of something that's not physical but not energy? I think that I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is. I don't think the duality is energy and matter, and that's all there is. I don't think that's the case. And according to Einstein's equation, energy and matter, one is the other. They can convert to one another. But I'm getting in way over my head. I don't know. It's a science question. I don't have an answer to that. Matt, it'll be the third tight race in a row because it's severe incompetence, yes. Versus severe incompetence, yes. All either side needs to do is put up not a total moron, yes. Completely with you. And particularly Republicans, because I think the country generally is a right of center country. And all the Republicans have to do is put up somebody decent and they win. I think the only reason Obama won in 2008 is because Bush was blamed for the financial crisis and 9/11 and the Iraq fiasco. And I think that was, and they put up McCain, who was a nothing. So I think that's why Obama won. And I think he beat Romney because he was incompetent and he had momentum being an incumbent. And Romney ran a bad campaign. But I think Romney could have beaten Hillary. I think Romney could beat Biden, could beat Kamala. And again, I think almost anybody on that stage when the Republican debated could beat, maybe with the exception of Vivek, could beat Kamala. all you have to do is be competent and sane. But it's hard. It's hard for the base of Marjorie Taylor Greene and Laura Loomer to support sane. If that's the base, then sane is out. Michael says, isn't Bibi such wasted potential? The man has the knowledge, the intellect, the charisma to be an amazing leader. Instead, he defaults to worthless powerlust. Yes, he's a massive wasted potential. So are most people. But yes, massive wasted potential. It's sad. Even his father, I think, thought that of him. So, yep. Gail says MAGA equals primitivism. Yes, primitivism, barbarism. It really, really bad. Ryan Murphy. What are your thoughts on the claim that violent crime is actually up, but changes in reporting criteria to FBI skewed the numbers? I mean, here's the thing. That when you take it, there's one number that's hard to fake. There's one number that's hard to fake. And that number is murders. Murders are murders are murders. I mean, yes, there's some borderline cases. Is it a third degree? But somebody's dead. They're on the floor, they're dead. They've just been stabbed, they've just been shot. Hard to fake those. And the thing about murders, too, is that the local media keeps track of them, right? The Chicago Press lets you know when people die, when people are killed, when there's a shooting and stuff like that. So of all the violent crime stats, the one that's easiest to track and the one that doesn't go through many revisions and there's not a lot of disagreement about across all the different people who track crime is murder. And murder is massively down in the United States. I mean, dramatically down this year. At least I haven't seen what happened this summer, so maybe this summer changed things, but I don't think so. I haven't heard of just crime going through the roof this summer. So my expectation is that that murder's run. And murder is correlated with other crimes. In areas where violent crime is rampant, murders are up. And in areas where violent crime is not rampant, murders tend to be down. So you'd think that violent crime is correlated with murders, and murder rates, the one objective number that one can track, is way down. Way down. You know, maybe this will be the largest decrease we've ever seen. Bringing us back almost, maybe not quite, but almost to the good old, 2014, 2015, 2014, 15, where murder rates were the lowest maybe in all of American history on a per 100,000 population basis. It's also true that the FBI is not the only entity that tracks violent crime. There are a number of different independent agencies and other agencies and journalists without any particular political leaning that follow this, that try to aggregate crime statistics. You can get them you call the police up and you can get them. And academics. So okay, maybe the FBI is faking the numbers, but what about all these other entities? What about all these other people keeping track of it? Now, it could be that some crimes are underreported, and certainly there's an uptick, or it seems to be an uptick in things like shoplifting and things like that. Even there, it's lower than it supposedly was 2 years ago. But there, I believe there's more fudging, and partially a lot of crime doesn't go reported, so it's harder to tell. Murders are the one things we actually know. And it's down. It's way down. Look, I remember being in New York City in the 1970s, and everybody told you, be careful, really don't go walking in Manhattan at night, and don't go to Central Park even during the day. Just don't go to Central Park. It's a dangerous place. It's a horrible place and a dangerous place. Don't go. Now, I was a kid, but that was generally the advice. You don't go to Central Park and you don't go in the streets of New York at night. And that's not true today. Indeed, today you could go to Central Park in the night, but certainly during the day it's packed with people. And the streets I see in New York City at night, I see young women walking around by themselves. People feel relatively safe. as compared to the 1970s. So, I just don't see it. I don't see the statistics seem to correspond with reality. Crime peaked in the United States and in New York City in 1991. And since 1991, they went down dramatically. In 2014, 2015, they went up a little bit. Under Trump, they were kind of stable, a little off their lowest level. But when Trump said there is carnage in the streets of America, it was the safest period in time in American history. I said so at the time. So he's been lying about the crime statistics forever. And then they spiked during COVID, not to the levels of the 80s and early 90s, but they spiked significantly. And then since 2021, they've been going down. 2022 is lower, 23 is lower, 24 is significantly low. And again, I'm using murder as proxy for other violent crime. I don't use just the FBI source. You've got to look at a variety of different sources. You can look at local police data that they report in their own city, and maybe they're fudging. But is everybody fudging? And there are cities where crime is up. I can't remember right now offhand where, but in some cities, crime is up. So are those the cities that didn't get the memo that they're supposed to fudge? I don't buy it. Too big of a conspiracy. Bradley, has the U.S. military aid arrived in Ukraine yet? Yeah, I mean, U.S. military aid is constantly arriving in Ukraine. There's a period in which they ran out of money, but it's been reconfirmed, and the aid continues, yes. But they're limited in how they can use the aid. Reminder, stickers. Support the Yaron Brook Show. Value for those of you live. There's a bunch of you, even on the chat, that I've never seen a sticker from you. I've never seen a super chat from you. You can just do it for even $2 or something. It's not that big of a deal, but like you're obviously here, you're engaged, you're getting a value. Trade. Urum says $10 to Yaron for a positive news update or something of that nature. I gave one yesterday. I didn't come across a positive news update today, although that Special Forces story I thought was cool. I'm trying to think if I've come across today a story that was positive. I haven't. I'll make sure tomorrow to have plenty of positive stuff for your room. So tomorrow's story. John, if Trump stops sending weapons, should Ukraine go ahead and use the U.S. weapons they have to the greatest advantage, regardless of U.S. wishes? Yeah, the problem is that they're not going to get ammunition for it. Might as well, use it to the best of their ability in the meantime. But it would be, it's going to be very difficult for Ukraine if Trump stops sending weapons. The Europeans are going to have to step up in a major way. They already have. They've spent more money on Ukraine than the U.S. has. I don't know how much more they can afford to do. Ultimately, Europe is pretty poor relative to the U.S. But, Ukraine will probably lose. And Trump will probably cut this deal. And Ukraine will have to hand over the territory. This is the consequence of voting for Trump. Consequence of Trump winning, not the consequence of voting for him. It's the consequence of Trump winning. James, are you suggesting a global war on radical Islam? Yes. I've been suggesting it for 23 years. Literally, 23 years. Yes, I'm suggesting a war on radical Islam, a global war on radical Islam. I'm suggesting freezing and stopping all Muslim immigration while we execute this war. I'm suggesting the destruction of Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, anybody. Encouraging our partners in the Middle East to clamp down on the Muslim Brotherhood, destroying the Iranian regime, telling the Pakistanis they better shape up, and making sure that the Taliban, they can have Afghanistan, but they will not do anything to suggest being a haven for terrorism. That is, put drones up in the air permanently and knock down anything that is suspicious in terms of potential terrorist activity or terrorist participation. And then kill as many Taliban as you can in the meantime, just to keep them off guard, right? And then round up the Islamist networks in England, in Europe, in the United States. And, you know, if there's actual proof of them committing criminal offenses, lock them up. Otherwise, as part of the war, deport them, send them back to the Middle East. But make sure they're Islamists, not just Muslims, right? They have to be Islamists. They have to be active members of Islamist organizations. Yeah, I mean, there won't be a lot of active members of Islamist organizations if you win the war against Islamism. If you actually define it, declare it, and fight it. It will be over very quickly. This is not a hard war to win. Again, read the book, Winning the Unwinnable War. Winning the Unwinnable War. You take out Iran, you've done 80, 90%. 80, 90% of what's necessary by taking out Iran. Because they are the number one funder, supporter, encourager, and spiritual inspiration for terrorism around the world. And you will send a message to terrorists, America won't tolerate this anymore. God, this is scary. And the common people who support Islamism will stop because, you know, because there's no upside. People are willing to commit suicide for a cause they believe can win. They're not willing to commit suicide for a cause that's going to lose, that they're convinced is going to lose. That's why terrorist attacks by ISIS have dropped dramatically. Boris, something like Pesa. Russia is using prisoners for cannon fodder. Not surprised. I know a lot of Russians see it as killing two birds with one stone. What do you think? Disgusting. But Russia is fighting this war in a disgusting manner, and it's using its own people as cannon fodder, and then it uses prisoners of war as cannon fodder, and it's just horrific. It's an evil regime, and it should be clearly identified as such, unequivocally. Whether doesn't mean you send American troops, but it should be. Philosophy at work. Maribbens, I love your puns. You love to tease, to tease our blessed runs at 23 degrees. Right? I'm sure there's meaning there. Philosophy at work will figure it out. All right, John, how come Poland and Hungary don't have a problem with Islamic terrorism? Are they bombing Iran? How come no Bataclans or 9/11s in Poland, immigration? No, it's just not a significant country. Why attack Poland or Hungary? There's no, as far as I know, there's been no terrorist attacks in Portugal, even though they have African immigration. As far as I know, I'm trying to think of other countries. There have been plenty of countries where there have been no terrorist attacks. But the reality is that it's easy to do it in France because there are a lot of Muslims in France. So there are a lot of people you can recruit. It's easy to do it in England because, again, the same thing. Easy to do in Germany for the same reason. A lot of Muslims there, immigrants. But it is interesting that when we bomb Iran, terrorism declines in Europe. And when we don't bomb Iran, terrorism increases. But it has nothing to do with immigration because a Muslim in Germany could drive to Poland and blow himself up in Poland if he wanted to. But the reality is, Poland's not significant. Germany, France, England are significant. When Poland becomes significant, there will be terrorist attacks against them. Isn't it interesting that Islamists attack Russia? Right? They attack anything that they believe poses a alternative, a challenge to their own set of beliefs. They don't have a cause, they don't have a reason to engage in terrorism. They engage in terrorism because they are an aggressive ideology that believes in world domination, and they will attack anybody that they think is relevant to that. Argentina has no Muslim immigration, and yet has had Islamic terrorist attacks in Argentina. There's very little Muslims, very few Muslims in Argentina, and yet they've had terrorism. It's not an issue of immigration. Now, immigration makes it easier because you've got people there that you can recruit, sure, of course. But the problem is not that. The problem is that they believe they can win. The problem is that the West has appeased them. Poland's just not associated with the appeasing West. They just, again, who cares? Terrorist attack in Poland, nobody cares. France, Germany, that's the center of civilization, of Western civilization. People care. Russia, center of Eastern civilization that they view as in opposition to Islam, so they attack them. America, opposed again to Islam ideologically. Argentina, I don't know, a regime that they can bribe or used to be able to bribe, and yeah, so they did it, they had opportunity. But yeah, immigration makes, there's no question, Muslim immigration to Europe makes terrorism more likely. That's no surprise. And they attack the countries at the heart of Europe because it's the heart of Europe. It's the heart of Western civ. It's what they want to terrorize. That's who you terrorize. But Iran has attacked and has sponsored attacks that are unrelated to any particular grievance they have about the West and the Middle East. Islamists want to destroy the West because they believe that they should dominate the world. And Ayatollah Khomeini talked about this often, about Sharia law globally. They're a globalist ideology. It's like, what you're suggesting is like Nazi apologists. Right? Hitler only attacked because he felt threatened. Putin only attacked because he felt threatened. Islamists only kill because they feel threatened. No, they attack because they want to dominate the world and because the other side is weak. Hitler attacked because he perceived the other side is weak. Russia attacked because they perceived support for Ukraine as weak. And the Islamists attacked the West because they perceived the West's commitment to their own way of life and to their own ideology and to everything as weak. And the only way to stop their attacks is to change their mind about that, is to destroy them. They deserve it, and it's a form of justice, and it's a form of security for the future. And by the way, you guys love Hungary so much, go live in Hungary. I mean, I want to see people voting with their feet. Hungary's a hellhole. It's a horrible place. Its economy sucks. You don't really have free speech. It's not a free country, even by the standards of unfreedom of the West. You've got a mini authoritarian, and they want to impose their Christian values on you. You want to live in a place like that? Go there. Don't try to bring those values anywhere else. They're sickening. And they're anti-Western. They're anti-civilized. Lucinda, been reading more Plato's Republic, been taking a long time because I take extensive notes. Thoughts on the weird proto-eugenics rigged sex lotteries section of Plato's Republic. Oh God. Plato wants to control everything. Plato really believes that the vast majority of humanity cannot know what's good for them, cannot comprehend it, and therefore they need guidance on everything, including marriage and sex, and he's definitely promoting a kind of eugenics that the philosopher king has access to knowledge of how to do, even though they didn't know genetics at the time. It's unbelievably totalitarian. It's not authoritarian, it's totalitarian. He wants the philosopher king to be involved in every single aspect of everybody's life. And you can understand why, because he believes that only the philosopher king has access to truth about anything. And truth is important. To his credit, he views truth as important. So, those are my off-the-cuff thoughts. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of analysis that could go there. And we've got some Plato experts that once in a while I interview here. You can ask them, Jason Rines and Greg Slamieri. Jason, I think, has written on Plato. Nefel, the enlightened politicians keep warning you, when the rat population declines, you know who to blame. I'm not sure I completely understand what you're saying, I have to admit. When the rat population declines, when the rats leave, then the ship is going to be sinking because they're the first ones to know it's going to be sinking? Probably. Something like that. Matt, this is for helping me stay sane in an insane world. And this is the last question. Thoughts on Alex O'Connor and another Michael Shermer? Yeah, it's a good analogy, similar. He seems like a reasonable guy who certainly takes his atheism seriously. Good for him for that. Confused about morality, as so many of them are, as so many of these atheists are. But is willing to fight for his atheism and for at least the application of reason to big chunks of life, which is important, and good for him for doing that. All right, I want to remind you of our sponsors. John Barber, Phi Life, Philife, Phi Life. John takes information you get from all these influencers on life extension and health and diet and exercise and all this other stuff. Incredibly confusing, lots of data. He integrates it and he helps you apply it to your life, and he emphasizes the idea you should try it out for yourself, because just because it works on average, just because it works for that group doesn't mean it works for you. And you have to figure out what works for you, and he gives you techniques and methods to do that. He has a YouTube channel, link is below. Please subscribe to his YouTube channel. He is sponsoring this show. He is a fan of the show, and you can help out a lot by going over there and subscribing and hopefully gaining some knowledge from him. I plan to interview him on probably on one of my members' show. So please consider supporting him, which reminds me, I can actually gift some memberships. Membership gifting. Yeah, there we go. Let's see if that'll work. Lucinda says she loves reading Plato, especially compared to reading German philosophy. Yes, it's so understandable. Understandable. Yeah. Nevfel says, I mean house rats in the sense of house pets. Okay. I'm still not, okay, let's try to read your previous comment with that understanding. The enlightened politicians keep warning you, when the rat population declines, you know who to blame. So the immigrants are eating your rats. Is that the point? Well, I mean, if the rat population declines, I'm always happy no matter what the cause, pretty much. I hate rats. Hate rats. All right, it's not letting me gift. I'll have to try it again tomorrow. All right, what do I want to do? Yes, Ayn Rand Institute is a sponsor. For all you listeners in Australia, and I know you're there, we're gonna, help us have the largest objectivist event ever in Australia. We're gonna do so in Brisbane. The Ayn Rand conference Ayn Rand Institute is coming to Brisbane. We're gonna have a conference there on December 6th to 8th. I'll be there. Nikos will be there. It'll be a lot of fun. Great meeting you. If you're a fan, if you're listening to the show, please introduce yourself. We'll maybe do a get-together, a meet-up for all the show listeners. So come, sign up, register. If you are a student and you would like a scholarship, you can apply for a scholarship. So you can get all the information about scholarships, about attending, about tuition, all of that at aynrand.org/start here. aynrand.org/start here. And you can get all this stuff. And finally, Alex Epstein, the #1 world expert on energy, fossil fuels, so-called alternative energy, climate change, environmentalism. Alex is your guy. alexepstein.substack.com, where you can get talking points on pretty much all the issues related to those fields as they come up. You get regular updates from Alex about what is going on out there in the world when it comes to energy. All right, guys. Thank you. Thanks to all the super chatters. I really, really appreciate it. And I will see you guys probably tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day. See you tomorrow. Bye, everybody.